In a shadowy manner, a cunning old lady, Miss Marple, steps into a web of greed and danger. A threatening note, a poisoned teacup, a stolen jewel, and a blazing fire point to a corrupt lord's dirty land deal. With her knitting needles and sharp mind, Miss Marple unravels lies, traps a scheming villain, and exposes a trail of bribes and betrayal. Will her quiet wits outsmart the powerful? Dive into a thrilling mystery where truth cuts like a knife. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthornne Manor. Jane Marple. A quiet older lady from the small village of St. Mary Mead sat in her cozy parlor. The morning sun slipped through lace curtains, painting soft light on her favorite armchair. She was knitting a scarf, her needles clicking like a gentle clock, when the postman's knock broke the calm. A letter slid through the slot, landing on her doormat with a soft thud. Miss Marple set her knitting aside and shuffled over, her slippers whispering on the polished floor. The envelope was thick, creamy, and sealed with red wax, a fancy touch. That made her raise an eyebrow. She broke the seal and pulled out a letter written in neat, curling handwriting. It was from Lady Beatrice Harrow, a woman Miss Marple barely knew from a garden party years ago. The letter invited her to spend a weekend at Blackthornne Manor. The Harrow family's grand estate, about an hour's train ride from St. Mary Mead. The words were polite, promising good company and fine meals, but something felt off. Lady Beatrice's tone was too eager, almost like she was begging Miss Marple to come. A gathering of interesting folk, the letter said, to share ideas and enjoy the autumn air. Miss Marple's sharp eyes lingered on those words. Interesting folk, ideas. She smelled a mystery, like a faint whiff of smoke before a fire. Miss Marple folded the letter and tapped it against her chin. She wasn't one for fancy parties or big houses, but her curiosity tugged at her like a naughty cat with a ball of yarn. Blackthornne Manor was known for its wealth and secrets, and the Harrows were no strangers to gossip. Sir Reginald Harrow, Lady Beatrice's husband, was a powerful man with a sharp tongue and sharper ambition. Whispers in St. Mary Mead hinted at his shady deals, land grabs, hushed-up scandals, and folks who crossed him ending up worse off. Lady Beatrice, on the other hand, was said to be kind but weak, always in her husband's shadow. Why would she invite a simple village spinster like Miss Marple? There was more to this than tea and chatter. She decided to go. Packing was easy. A few dresses, her best hat, and her knitting bag stuffed with yarn and needles. She left a note for her neighbor, Mrs. Price, to water her roses, and caught the noon train. The countryside rolled by, green hills, golden fields, and cows chewing lazily under wide oaks. Miss Marple watched it all, her mind turning over the letter's words. She didn't trust fancy invitations, not when they came from folks like the Harrows. In her experience, rich people only noticed quiet types like her when they needed something, or when trouble was brewing. The train chugged to a stop at Blackthornne Station. A tiny platform with a single bench and a crooked sign. A driver in a dark uniform waited, holding a card with Miss Marple scrawled on it. He tipped his cap and led her to a sleek black car, its engine purring like a contented cat. The drive to Blackthornne Manor wound through narrow lanes, past stone walls and tangled hedges. Then the manor came into view, and Miss Marple's breath caught. It was huge, all gray stone and pointed towers, like something from a storybook about ghosts or knights. Ivy clung to its walls, and tall windows glinted in the fading light. It was beautiful but cold, like a smile that didn't reach the eyes. The car crunched to a stop on the gravel drive. A maid, young and nervous, opened the heavy oak door and took Miss Marple's bag. Inside, the manor was even grander, polished floors, chandeliers sparkling like frozen rain, and portraits of stern-faced Harrows staring down from the walls. The air smelled of wax and old wood, with a hint of roses from a vase nearby. Lady Beatrice hurried forward, her silk dress rustling. She was a thin woman, maybe 50, with pale skin and eyes that darted like a frightened bird's. "Miss Marple, how kind of you to come," she said, her voice high and shaky. She clasped Miss Marple's hands, her fingers cold despite the warm room. "Thank you for inviting me," Miss Marple said, smiling gently. She noticed Lady Beatrice's forced cheer, the way her lips twitched as if holding back a worry. Something was wrong. And Miss Marple's knack for spotting trouble hummed like a tuning fork. Lady Beatrice led her to a grand parlor where the other guests waited. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting shadows on velvet chairs and a long table set with crystal glasses. 4 people turned to look as Miss Marple entered, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. Lady Beatrice made introductions. Her voice fluttering like a moth. First was Sir Reginald Harrow, a tall man with a square jaw and gray hair slicked back like a hawk's feathers. His suit was tailored, his tie pin glinting with a tiny ruby. He shook Miss Marple's hand with a grip that was too tight, his cold blue eyes sizing her up. "A pleasure," he said, but his tone suggested he'd rather be elsewhere. Miss Marple smiled politely, noting the way he stood shoulders back, chin high like a king in his castle. She'd met men like him before, all pride and power, with secrets tucked behind their smirks. Next was Clara Wentworth, a journalist with short brown hair and a sharp, clever face. She wore a simple green dress, but her eyes sparkled with mischief, like she was always hunting a story. "Heard of you, Miss Marple," Clara said, her handshake firm. "They say you've got a nose for trouble." Her grin was friendly, but Miss Marple caught a flicker of calculation. Clara was here for more than polite chit-chat, she was, after something juicy. Then came Dr. Ernest Poole. A quiet man with round glasses and a balding head. His tweed suit was neat but worn, and he kept his hands clasped as if nervous. "Good to meet you," he mumbled, barely meeting her eyes. Miss Marple sensed he was hiding something, not out of guilt but fear. Doctors often saw too much, she thought, especially around powerful men like Sir Reginald. Last was Victor Crane, a businessman with a charming smile and slick black hair. His suit was flashy, his cufflinks catching the firelight. "Miss Marple, what a delight," he said, bowing slightly, his voice smooth as honey. He was too polished, too eager, like a salesman with a bad deal. Miss Marple nodded, her instincts whispering that Victor was trouble wrapped in charm. Lady Beatrice clapped her hands. "Dinner will be soon. Please, make yourselves at home." She gestured to the parlor's plush chairs, but her smile wobbled. Sir Reginald muttered something about business and strode out, leaving the others to chat. Miss Marple settled into a corner, her knitting needles clicking as she listened. Clara grilled Dr. Poole about local health policies, her questions sharp but casual. Victor spun a tale about a recent trip to London, his laugh loud but hollow. Lady Beatrice hovered, offering tea and biscuits, her eyes flicking to the door. As if expecting bad news, Miss Marple's needles moved steadily, but her ears were sharp. She caught snippets, Clara mentioning land deals in a low voice. Dr. Poole's quick glance at Victor. Victor's too quick laugh when Lady Beatrice asked about his business. The room felt like a pot about to boil over, full of secrets. And sideways looks. She thought of her village, where gossip was like bread, shared daily. People were the same everywhere, she mused, rich or poor. They hid their truths behind smiles. Dinner was announced. And the group moved to a dining room that could have fit half of St. Mary Mead. A long table gleamed under candlelight, set with silver and fine china. The food was rich roast beef, creamy potatoes, and wine that sparkled in crystal goblets. Sir Reginald sat at the head, his voice booming as he talked about his plans to build on nearby land. "Progress, my friends," he said, raising his glass. "This county needs vision, and I've got it." His smile was all teeth, like a wolf's. Clara leaned forward, her fork pausing. "Progress for who, Sir Reginald?" "I hear the farmers aren't happy about losing their land." Her tone was light, but her eyes were hard, like she was tossing a stone to see where it landed. Sir Reginald's smile tightened. "Farmers always grumble. They'll see the benefits soon enough." He waved a hand, dismissing her words. But Miss Marple saw his knuckles whiten around his glass. Lady Beatrice stared at her plate, her fork trembling. Dr. Poole coughed, his face pale, while Victor smirked, sipping his wine as if enjoying the tension. Miss Marple ate quietly, her mind sorting the pieces. Clara was bold, poking at Sir Reginald's plans like a stick in a hornet's nest. The land deal was clearly a sore spot, and Sir Reginald's confidence felt brittle, like thin ice. Lady Beatrice's silence was loud. She knew something. Maybe more than she could bear. Dr. Poole and Victor were harder to read their quietness, a mask for deeper thoughts. Miss Marple's village had taught her that trouble often hid in what people didn't say. And this table was full of unspoken words. The meal ended with fruit and cheese, the candles burning low. The guests were about to rise when a scream tore through the manor, sharp and raw. It came from the library, a room off the main hall. Sir Reginald cursed under his breath, and the group rushed toward the sound, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Miss Marple followed, her heart steady despite the chaos. She'd heard screams before, and they always led to truth, however ugly. In the library, Lady Beatrice stood trembling, a crumpled paper in her hand. Books lined the walls, their leather spines glowing in the lamplight, but the air was thick with fear. "What is it, Beatrice?" Sir Reginald snapped, his voice like a whip. She held out the paper, her face white as milk. "It's a threat," she whispered. "Someone wants us gone." Miss Marple stepped closer, her eyes sharp. The paper was cheap, the words scratched in rough, jagged letters. "Leave the land alone or you'll pay, all of you." The writing was uneven, with misspellings that felt deliberate, like a child pretending to be clumsy. Sir Reginald snatched the note, his jaw tight. "Nonsense," he growled. Some fool's idea of a joke. But his eyes darted to the shadows. And Miss Marple saw fear behind his bluster. Clara peered over his shoulder, her reporter's instinct kicking in. "Doesn't look like a joke to me. Who'd send this?" She glanced at the group, her question hanging like smoke. Dr. Poole adjusted his glasses, saying nothing. Victor raised an eyebrow, his charm replaced by a cold curiosity. Lady Beatrice sank into a chair, her hands twisting in her lap. Miss Marple stayed quiet, her mind racing. Note was a spark, and this manor was dry tinder. Someone here or nearby wanted to stop Sir Reginald's plans. Was it a farmer, angry at losing their land? A rival, jealous of his power? Or someone closer, hiding among the guests? She thought of her village, where a stolen pie once uncovered a web of lies. Small clues, like that note, could unravel big. Secrets? "Perhaps we should call the police," Miss Marple said softly, her voice calm but firm. Sir Reginald scoffed. "No need for that. I'll handle it." His tone was final, but Miss Marple caught Lady Beatrice's pleading look as if begging for help. The other guests murmured their faces, a mix of doubt and worry. The fire in the library crackled, slight dancing on the notes still in Sir Reginald's hand. Miss Marple returned to her room later, her knitting bag slung over her arm. The manor was quiet now, but the silence felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. She sat by her window, the moonlight silver on the lawns below. The note, the scream, the tense dinner, they were pieces of a puzzle, and she was good at puzzles. Sir Reginald was at the center, his ambition a magnet for trouble. But Lady Beatrice, Clara, Dr. Poole, and Victor, they each had their own shadows, their own reasons to lie. She picked up her knitting, the needles clicking like a heartbeat. Tomorrow, she'd watch and listen, just as she did in St. Mary Mead. People always revealed themselves bit by bit, like yarn unspooling from a skein. Blackthornne Manor was no different from her village, she thought. It was just bigger, with fancier lies. As she worked a new row, Miss Marple smiled. The Battle of Wits had begun, and she was ready. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Corruption, the morning after the scream. Blackthornne Manor woke to a gray sky, heavy with clouds that promised rain. Miss Jane Marple sat at her window, her knitting needles clicking softly as she watched mist curl over the estate's lawns. The threatening note from last night lingered in her mind, its jagged words like thorns. She didn't believe Sir Reginald's claim that it was a prank. In her village of St. Mary Mead, threats were rare, but when they came, they meant trouble, real trouble, not just hot air. She tucked her yarn away and dressed, choosing a plain gray dress and her sturdy shoes. Today, she'd dig for answers, quiet as a mouse, but sharp as a tack. Breakfast was served in the dining room, the same grand space as last night's tense dinner. The long table gleamed with silver trays of eggs, bacon, and toast. But the mood was sour. Sir Reginald sat at the head, his face like a storm cloud as he read a newspaper. Lady Beatrice hovered near the sideboard, pouring tea with hands that shook slightly. Clara Wentworth, the journalist, scribbled in a small notebook, her eyes darting to Sir Reginald now and then. Dr. Ernest Poole picked at his food, his glasses slipping down his nose, while Victor Crane leaned back in his chair, all smiles but with a glint in his eye that Miss Marple didn't trust. Miss Marple took a seat near the window, her plate modest with toast and jam. She listened as she spread butter, her ears catching every word. Clara asked Lady Beatrice about the note, her voice casual but probing. Any idea who'd send something like that? Seems personal. Lady Beatrice's cup rattled in its saucer. Oh, I don't know. Probably some silly joke, as Reginald says. Her smile was thin, and Miss Marple saw her glance at her husband. Like a deer checking for a wolf, Sir Reginald folded his paper with a snap. Enough about that nonsense. It's nothing. It's farmers grumbling, that's all. His voice was loud, meant to shut down talk, but Miss Marple caught the edge in it, fear dressed up as anger. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where Mr. Hodge, the butcher, got loud when folks asked about his short waits. Loudness often hid guilt. Victor chuckled, swirling his coffee. Farmers, they don't usually write notes. Sounds like someone with a grudge. His tone was light, but his eyes flicked to Sir Reginald. Testing. Clara's pencil paused, and Dr. Poole coughed, his fork clattering. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her face calm but her mind racing. Victor was stirring the pot, and the others were nervous. Why? What did they know? After breakfast, Miss Marple asked Lady Beatrice if she could see the threatening note again. Just to ease my mind, she said, her voice gentle. Lady Beatrice hesitated, then fetched it from a locked drawer in the library. The paper was cheap, the kind sold at any village shop, and the words were scratched in black ink. Leave the land alone, or you'll pay, all of you. Miss Marple tilted it to the light, noting the uneven letters and deliberate misspellings, alone instead of alone, pay instead of pay. It felt staged, like a child pretending to be careless. She handed it back, her smile polite, but her thoughts sharp. Someone wanted to scare the Harrows, but they didn't want to be caught. Not yet. Lady Beatrice clutched the note, her eyes wide. Do you think it's serious, Miss Marple? She whispered. Miss Marple patted her hand. It's best to be careful, dear, but don't worry. Things have a way of coming clear. She didn't say more, but her mind was already turning over suspects. Sir Reginald's land deal was the key. Clara had hinted at it last night, and the note mentioned it directly. Who stood to lose if the deal went through, or who stood to gain by stopping it? Miss Marple decided to explore the estate grounds. A walk would clear her head, and servants often knew more than their masters thought. She slipped on her coat and hat, her knitting bag slung over her arm, and stepped into the cool morning air. The Manor's gardens were grand, with neat hedges, and roses still blooming despite the autumn chill. Beyond them stretched fields, some dotted with sheep, others plowed for crops. She followed a gravel path toward the stables, where she spotted an older man raking leaves. His face was weathered, his hands rough from work. Cake gardener, she guessed, and likely full of gossip. Good morning, Miss Marple said, her smile. Warm, lovely ground you keep. The man tipped his cap, his eyes crinkling. "Thank thee, Miss Names Gibbs. Been here 30 years. He leaned on his rake, glad for a chat. Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking as she pulled out. Her knitting? 30 years. You must know everything about this place. Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp, inviting him to talk. Gibbs chuckled, then lowered his voice. I mourn most. The Harrows, they're a grand lot, but not all's rosy. He glanced at the manor, then back at her. This land. Deal Sir Reginald's pushing it's got folks riled. Farmers round here, they've worked their fields for generations. Now he's buying 'em out, or so he says. Price is so low, it's near robbery. Miss Marple's needles paused. Robbery, that's a strong word. She kept her voice soft, encouraging him to spill more. Gibbs shrugged, his face grim. Call it what you like, miss. Folks sign papers, but some say they never meant to. Forged, maybe. And those who fight back. They get visits from Sir Reginald's men, big lads with hard fists. Or worse, they lose their leases. It's got friends in high places. See? Magistrates, councilmen, it's all in his pocket. Miss Marple nodded, her mind filing away. Every word. Forged papers, bribes, threats, rets. Which was a nasty picture, like the time St. Mary Mead's baker was caught watering his flour. Sir Reginald's wealth wasn't just from old money, it seemed. He was squeezing the land and its people, building his empire on their backs. Sounds unfair, she said, her tone mild, but her eyes keen. Anyone fighting back? Gibbs hesitated, then pointed to a distant field. Some farmers they meet quiet-like, talk of lawyers. But it's risky, Sir Reginald. Don't take kindly to troublemakers. And that note last night heard about it. From the maids could be one of 'em. Desperate. He shook his head. Or someone closer. Who knows? Chapter 3. A poisoned chalice rain pattered against the windows of Blackthornne Manor as Miss Jane Marple sipped her tea in the grand dining room. The second afternoon was gray and damp, mirroring the heavy mood among the guests. Her knitting needles clicked softly in her lap, a steady rhythm that helped her think. The threatening note from the first night, with its jagged words and fake misspellings, still nagged at her. Mr. Gibbs, the gardener, had painted a grim picture of Sir Reginald Harrow's land deals, forged papers, bribes, and bullied farmers. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from solved. Something darker was afoot, and Miss Marple's sharp eyes missed nothing. The dining room was warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth and silver teapots steaming on the table. Lady Beatrice flitted about, offering scones and cucumber sandwiches, her hands trembling slightly. Sir Reginald stood by the window, his broad shoulders stiff as he spoke in low tones to Victor Crane, the charming but slippery businessman. Clara Wentworth, the journalist, sat near Miss Marple, her pencil scratching in a notebook as she watched the room like a hawk. Dr. Ernest Poole, the quiet doctor, stirred his tea absently, his glasses slipping down his nose. The air felt thick, as if everyone was holding their breath. Miss Marple nibbled a scone, her ears tuned to the chatter. Clara leaned closer, her voice low. I checked some records last night, she whispered. The land deal's fishy. Signatures that don't match payments to people who don't exist. Sir Reginald's hiding something big. Her eyes gleamed like a hunter scenting a story. Miss Marple nodded, her face calm, but her mind racing. Clara's digging confirmed what Gibbs had said. The land deal wasn't just greedy, it was crooked. Built on lies and dirty money before Miss Marple could reply. A choked gasp cut through the room. Dr. Poole clutched his throat, his teacup clattering to the table. His face turned red, then purple, his eyes bulging as he wheezed. The guests froze, teacups halfway to lips. Miss Marple was on her feet in a flash, her knitting tumbling to the floor. Quick, lay him flat. She ordered, her voice sharp but steady. Victor and Clara rushed to help, easing Dr. Poole to the rug. His breaths were shallow, his hands clawing at his collar. Miss Marple knelt beside him, her mind clicking like her needles. His symptoms: choking, flushed skin, dilated pupils, screamed. Poison. She'd read about such things in her nephew's medical books and seen a case in St. Mary Mead years ago, when a jealous wife spiked her husband's tea. Bicarbonate of soda now. She called to Lady Beatrice, who stood trembling. "Fetch the doctor from the village." A maid scurried off, while Sir Reginald barked at the staff to stay calm, his face pale despite his bluster. Lady Beatrice returned with a glass of cloudy liquid, and Miss Marple spooned it into Dr. Poole's mouth, propping his head. "Swallow, dear," she murmured, her tone soothing but firm. The soda could neutralize some poisons, she knew, though it wasn't a cure. Dr. Poole gagged but managed a few sips, his breathing easing slightly. Victor loosened the doctor's tie, while Clara fanned him with a napkin. The room was a flurry of panic, but Miss Marple stayed cool, her village instincts kicking in. She'd handled crises before sick children. Fainting, Lady Anne knew a clear head was worth more than gold. Within minutes, the village doctor, a stout man named Dr. Hayes, burst in, his bag rattling with tools. He examined Dr. Poole, muttering about toxins and stomach pumps. "Hayes lucky," Dr. Hayes said, wiping his brow. "Whatever it was, you acted fast. He'll need hospital care, but he should pull through." The maids helped carry Dr. Poole to a guest room where Dr. Hayes stayed to monitor him. The dining room fell silent, the guests staring at the spilled teacup on the table, its contents soaking the white cloth dot. Miss Marple stood, brushing her skirt. "We must preserve the scene," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "That tea was tampered with." She pointed to the cup, its rim stained with a faint greenish tint. Sir Reginald scoffed, his hands clenched. "Ridiculous. It's probably bad milk or a weak heart." But his eyes darted to the door, and Miss Marple saw sweat on his brow. He was scared, and not just for Dr. Poole. Clara crouched by the table, sniffing the cup. "Smells odd," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Not milk. Something chemical." She looked at Miss Marple, her journalist's brain already churning. Victor paced, his usual charm replaced by a tight frown. "Who'd do this?" he asked, his voice sharp. "One of us." He glanced at the group, his eyes lingering on Sir Reginald. Then Lady Beatrice, who was wringing her hands, Miss Marple's mind word. Poison was personal, not random. Someone in this room, more nearby, wanted. Dr. Poole silenced. But why? She recalled his nervous glances at dinner, his quiet talk with Victor yesterday. Had he stumbled on something about the land deal? Or was he part of it, targeted to keep him quiet? In St. Mary Mead, poison was a woman's weapon. But here, anyone could have slipped something into that cup. The tea tray had sat unattended for 10 minutes, while the maids fetched more scones. Plenty of time for a quick hand. She turned to the head maid, a thin woman named Elsie, who handled the tea. Miss Marple asked, her tone gentle to avoid scaring her. Elsie twisted her apron. "I poured it, miss, but I left the tray to get more cream. Anyone could have touched it." Her eyes flicked to the guests, then down. Miss Marple nodded, patting her arm. "You've done nothing wrong, dear. Just tell the police everything." Elsie bobbed her head, relieved but still jumpy. Sir Reginald stomped forward, his face red. "Police, this is my house. I'll not have it turned into a circus." His voice boomed, but Miss Marple saw his hands shake. He was cornered, and he knew it. Lady Beatrice touched his arm, her voice small. "Reginald, we must. If someone's hurt—" Her words trailed off, her eyes wet. Miss Marple felt a pang for her. Lady Beatrice was trapped, caught between her husband's schemes and her own fears. Clara stood her notebook out. "I'm calling the constable," she said, heading for the hall phone. "This isn't a game." Her tone was hard, like she'd seen enough to know poison wasn't an accident. Victor followed her, muttering about fetching his coat, but Miss Marple noted his quick steps. Was he eager to help, or slipping away to hide something? She filed it away, her village habits sharp watch. Listen, piece it together. While they waited for the police, Miss Marple examined the tea tray. 6 cups, 1 for each guest, but only Dr. Poole's was tainted. The pot itself smelled clean, meaning the poison was added after pouring. A precise job, not a sloppy one. She thought of poisons from her reading arsenic cyanide, belladonna. This one acted fast, suggesting something rare, not household rat poison. Whoever did it knew their craft, and that narrowed the suspects. Doctors like Poole had access to drugs, but so did rich men like Sir Reginald or connected ones like Victor. Even Clara, with her city contacts, wasn't above suspicion. The police arrived, constables in stiff uniforms led by Inspector Reed, a gruff man with a mustache like a broom. He listened as Miss Marple explained, his eyes narrowing at the teacup. We'll send it to the lab, he said, bagging it carefully. But this lot, he nodded at the guests, needs questioning. He set up in the library, calling each person one by one. Miss Marple sat nearby, knitting to blend. In her ears pricked. Sir Reginald went first, his voice loud through the door. This is outrageous. I'm the victim here, not Poole. He claimed no enemies, no motive, but Inspector Reed pressed about the land deal. Sir Reginald bristled, denying any wrongdoing. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Anger was too hot, like a man with secrets to burn. Lady Beatrice was next, her voice shaky. She swore she saw nothing, too busy serving. Just want everyone safe, she said, near tears. Miss Marple believed her heart, but not her eyes. Lady Beatrice was scared, maybe hiding what she knew to protect someone or herself. Clara's interview was brisk. She admitted digging into the land deal, but saw no one near the tea. I'm here for truth, she told Reed, her voice fierce. Miss Marple admired her grit, but wondered if Clara's snooping had made her a targetor, a suspect. Victor was smooth, claiming he was chatting with Sir Reginald when the tray was out. Just a guest, he said, his charm back in place. But Miss Marple recalled his absence during the tea setup. Had he slipped to the tray, or was he just dodging the chaos? Miss Marple went last, her story simple. She saw Dr. Poole collapse, acted fast, and noticed the tea's odd tint. I'm just an old lady, she said, her smile disarming. Inspector Reed nodded, but his eyes lingered, like he sensed her sharpness. She didn't mind. Let them underestimate. Hurt made her job easier. The police left with the teacup and a promise to follow up. Dr. Poole was stable, resting upstairs, but the manor felt like a pot ready to boil over. Sir Reginald stormed to his study, slamming the door. Lady Beatrice fled to her room, claiming a headache. Clara and Victor whispered in the parlor, their heads close. Miss Marple gathered her knitting, her mind sorting clues like yarn. The poison was no accident. Someone wanted Dr. Poole out, maybe because he knew too much. His quiet ways, his nervous glances, suggested he'd stumbled on the land deal's dirt. Or maybe he was in on it and someone wanted him gone to tie up loose ends. Sir Reginald's fear, Victor's sly moves, Clara's digging, even Lady Beatrice's nerves, all were threads in a tangled web. Miss Marple thought of St. Mary Mead, where a poisoned pie once cracked a theft ring. Small crimes led to big truths, and she'd find them here as she climbed the stairs to her room. The rain tapped harder, like fingers on a drum. The manor's shadows seemed to shift, hiding eyes that watched. Miss Marple's needles clicked in her bag, a reminder of her steady heart. Poison was just the start. The real battle wits against greed was heating up, and she was ready to knit the truth together, stitch by stitch. Chapter 4. The midnight intruder. The rain had stopped by evening, leaving Blackthornne Manor wrapped in a damp, chilly hush. Miss Jane Marple sat in her room, her knitting needles clicking as moonlight slipped through the curtains. The day's events. The poisoned tea, Dr. Poole's narrow escape. The police's questions swirled in her mind like leaves in a storm. The threatening note, Mr. Gibbs' tales of Sir Reginald's crooked land deals. And now poison pointed to a web of greed and fear. Someone in this house was desperate. Miss Marple's village instincts told her the truth was close, hiding in the shadows. She set her knitting aside, her eyes sharp. Tonight, she'd keep watch. Dinner had been a strained affair, the grand dining room heavy with silence. Sir Reginald barely spoke, his jaw tight as he stabbed at his roast. Lady Beatrice picked at her food, her eyes red, as if she'd been crying. Clara Wentworth, the journalist, watched everyone, her notebook tucked away but her mind clearly working. Victor Crane, the smooth-talking businessman, cracked jokes that fell flat, his charm fraying like old cloth. Dr. Poole was still resting upstairs, too weak to join, though the village doctor said he'd recover. Miss Marple had eaten quietly, her ears catching every creak and whisper. The manor felt like a pot about to boil over, and she wasn't one to miss the steam. After dinner, the guests scattered Sir Reginald to his study, Lady Beatrice to her room, Clara to the library, Victor to the parlor with a glass of brandy. Miss Marple excused herself, claiming tiredness, but sleep was the last thing on her mind. In St. Mary Mead, she'd learned that darkness brought out secrets, like moths to a flame. People moved when they thought no one watched, and she meant to see who stirred tonight. She changed into a dark shawl, slipped her knitting into her bag and propped her door open just a crack, settling into a chair by the window. The manor's clock struck 11, its chimes echoing down the halls. Miss Marple's eyes adjusted to the dimness, her ears pricked for any sound. The house creaked, old wood settling, but then came a new noise-off footsteps, cautious, like someone trying not to be heard. She leaned forward, peering through the door's sliver. A shadow moved in the hall, tall and quick, heading toward the west wing where Sir Reginald's study lay. Her heart beat steady, her village calm taking over. Whoever it was, they were up to no good. Miss Marple slipped into the hall, her slippers silent on the thick rug. The manor was a maze of corridors, lined with portraits and heavy drapes. But she'd memorized the layout during her walks. The study was Sir Reginald's private lair, full of papers and locked drawers, perfect for hiding secrets. She moved, like a ghost, keeping to the shadows, her small frame blending with the gloom. The footsteps stopped ahead, followed by a faint click of door opening. She crept closer, her breath shallow, peeked around a corner. The study door was ajar, a thin line of lamplight spilling out. Inside, a figure rummaged through Sir Reginald's desk. Their back to the door, Miss Marple squinted, catching a glint of cufflinks and slick black hair. Victor Crane. His hands moved fast, flipping through folders, pulling out papers. He muttered under his breath, too low to hear, but his urgency was clear. Miss Marple's mind raced. Was he hunting for evidence of Sir Reginald's fraud or covering his own tracks? She'd seen his sly glances, his quick exits. Victor was no innocent guest. She stepped closer, meaning to catch him red-handed, but a floorboard creaked under her foot. Victor's head snapped up, his eyes darting to the door. Miss Marple froze, but he was already moving, shoving papers back and bolting for the window. He pushed it open, the night air rushing in, and slipped out before she could call his name. The curtains swayed, and he was gone, leaving the study in disarray. Miss Marple hurried inside, her heart thumping, but her head clear. The desk was a mess, drawers, half-open papers scattered. She scanned quickly, her village knack for spotting clues kicking in. A small ledger caught her eye, its leather cover worn but its pages crisp. She flipped it open, her eyes skimming rows of numbers and initials. JB 500, TR 200, CW to 1000. Payments, she guessed, tied to the land deal. Some initials matched names. Clara had mentioned local officials, perhaps bribed to look the other way. Others were a mystery, but Victor had wanted this book. Why? She slipped the ledger into her knitting bag, her hands steady despite the risk. Evidence like this could crack the case, but it was dangerous to hold. In St. Mary Mead, a stolen ledger once exposed a cheating grocer. But this was bigger money, power, maybe murder. She straightened the desk to hide her tampering, closed the window, and left the study, her slippers whispering back to her room. The manor was quiet again, but her mind buzzed like a beehive. Back in her room, Miss Marple locked the door and sat by the lamp. The ledger opened before her. The payments spanned months, some dated just days ago. The amounts were large enough to buy silence or ruin lives. She thought of Sir Reginald's bluster, Victor's slide charm, Clara's digging. The ledger tied them together, but how? Was Victor a partner in the fraud, or a rival sniffing out dirt? And why sneak at midnight unless he feared being caught? Sleep was out of the question, so Miss Marple knitted her needles, calming her thoughts. The manor's secrets were piling up, threatening notes, poisoned tea, forged papers, and now this ledger. She recalled Dr. Poole's collapse, his choked gasps. The poison was meant to silence him, she was sure, but he'd survived thanks to her quick thinking. Did he know about these payments? Or was he one of the initials bought like the rest? Morning came with a pale sun, the manor stirring slowly. Miss Marple tucked the ledger under her mattress, a temporary hiding spot, and joined the guests for breakfast. The dining room was tense, the air thick with unspoken questions. Sir Reginald was red-faced, barking at a maid about cold eggs. Lady Beatrice looked exhausted, her hands twisting a napkin. Clara sipped coffee, her eyes flicking to Miss Marple, as if sensing she'd been busy. Victor was late, strolling in with a yawn, his cufflinks glinting, the same ones from the study. Miss Marple smiled politely, but her mind marked him like a pin in a map. Lady Beatrice cleared her throat, her voice shaky. I must tell you all something. Last night, a family heirloom was stolen. A sapphire brooch from my dressing table. Her eyes welled up, and Sir Reginald slammed his fist on the table. Thieves in my own house, he roared. I'll have the staff searched. The maids flinched, and Clara raised an eyebrow, her pencil poised. Victor leaned back, his face blank, but his fingers tapping. Miss Marple's needles paused. A theft. Now, it felt convenient, like a distraction from the poison in the note. She thought of Victor's midnight raid. Had he taken the brooch to sell, to frame someone, or to stir more chaos? In St. Mary Mead, a stolen ring once hid a bigger crime, and this brooch smelled the same. She spoke softly, her voice cutting. Through the din, perhaps it's misplaced, Lady Beatrice. Things turn up in odd places. Her tone was kind, but her eyes locked on Victor, who met her gaze for a split second before looking away. Clara jumped in, her voice crisp. Or someone's playing games. First a note, then poison, now this. It's no coincidence. She stared at Sir Reginald, who bristled but said nothing. Lady Beatrice dabbed her eyes, murmuring about calling the police again. Miss Marple nodded, encouraging it. The more eyes on this house, the harder for the culprit to hide. After breakfast, Miss Marple sought out Clara in the library, where shelves of leather books glowed in the morning light. Clara was flipping through a folder, her face intent. Find anything? Miss Marple asked, settling into a chair, her knitting out. Clara glanced up, then slid the folder over. Public records from the county office. The land deal's a mess. Half the sales contracts have mismatched signatures. Farmers swear they never signed. Her voice was low, excited. And I found a name tied to one of Sir Reginald's shell companies. Guess who? Miss Marple leaned forward, her needles still. Victor Crane. Clara nodded, her eyes gleaming. Bingo! He's not just a guest, he's neck-deep in this. But is he Sir Reginald's partner, or his rival? Miss Marple shared the ledger's details, keeping her voice soft. Payments to initials, some matching officials Clara had named. Victor was after this last night. He's hunting something or hiding it. Clara whistled, scribbling notes. We need to cross-check these initials. I've got a contact in town who can dig deeper. She paused, studying Miss Marple. You're sharp, you know that? Most old ladies would have run by now. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. I'm fond of puzzles, dear, and this one's got too many pieces to ignore. They agreed to share findings, but Miss Marple kept the ledger's hiding spot to herself. Trust was thin in this house, even with Clara's bold heart. She spent the afternoon strolling the grounds, chatting with maids and stable boys, her questions, gentle but pointed. No one had seen the brooch, but whispers about Victor's late-night walks raised her hackles. He was a fox in the henhouse, and she'd catch him yet by evening. The manor buzzed with new tension. The police returned, taking statements about the brooch. Sir Reginald accused the staff, his temper flaring, but Miss Marple saw his fear losing control piece by piece. Lady Beatrice clung to her husband, her face pale. Clara watched it all, her pencil flying. Victor laughed off questions, his charm back like a mask. Miss Marple knitted in the parlor, her eyes on the players, her mind weaving threads. The ledger, the brooch, the poison, the note, they were all linked. She was sure tied to Sir Reginald's land grab. Victor was the key, his midnight raid. A crack in the façade. But was he the mastermind, or a pawn in a bigger game? She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a stolen watch unraveled a smuggling ring. Small clues led to big truths, and she'd find them here, one stitch at a time. As night fell, Miss Marple locked her door, the ledger safe under her mattress. The manor's shadows seemed to whisper, but her heart was steady. The intruder had slipped away, but she'd caught his scent. The battle of wits was tightening, and Miss Marple's needles clicked like a clock, counting down to the truth. Casting pale stripes across Miss Jane Marple's room, she sat by the window, her knitting needles clicking as she thought over the past days. Threatening note, the poisoned tea, Victor's midnight raid, and the stolen brooch were like puzzle pieces scattered on a table. The ledger hidden under her mattress held secrets, payments to initials tied to Sir Reginald's crooked land deal. Miss Marple's village instincts hummed. Someone in this house was pulling strings, and she meant to snip them, quiet as a seamstress. She dressed in a soft green frock, pinned her hat, and slipped her knitting bag over her arm, ready to dig deeper. Breakfast was tense. The dining room's grandeur mocked by the guests' grim faces. Sir Reginald sat at the head, his newspaper crumpled, his eyes hard as flint. Lady Beatrice poured coffee, her hands steadier today, but her smile forced. Clara Wentworth, the journalist, ate toast while scanning the room, her sharp mind clearly at work. Victor Crane leaned back, his charm dimmed, his fingers drumming on the table. Dr. Ernest Poole, recovered enough to join, sat quietly, his glasses glinting as he avoided eye contact. Miss Marple took a seat near Lady Beatrice, her tea cooling as she listened to the silent scream with secrets. The talk was sparse weather, the manor's creaky pipes, but Miss Marple caught the undercurrents. Clara mentioned the brooch theft, her tone casual but probing. Any leads, Lady Beatrice? Seems odd, stealing right after the poisoning. Lady Beatrice's cup clinked. The police are looking, she murmured, glancing at Sir Reginald, who snorted. Waste of time. It's probably a maid with sticky fingers. His voice was gruff, but Miss Marple saw his knuckles whiten. He was nervous. And not just about a brooch. Victor smirked, swirling his coffee. Or someone stirring trouble. Notes poison, theft. This place is a circus. His eyes flicked to Dr. Poole, who coughed, his fork trembling. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. Victor was tossing pebbles to see who flinched, and Dr. Poole was jumpy. She recalled his collapse, the greenish tint in his teacup. Someone wanted him quiet, and she needed to know why. After breakfast, Miss Marple sought out Dr. Poole for a private chat. She found him in the library, surrounded by leather-bound books, his thin frame hunched over a medical journal. May I join you, doctor? She asked. her smile warm as she settled into a chair, her knitting out. He nodded, his glasses slipping. "Of course, Miss Marple," he mumbled, his voice tight. She knitted a few stitches, her tone gentle. "Shh, you gave us quite a scare yesterday. Feeling better?" Dr. Poole adjusted his glasses, his hands fidgeting. "Much better, thank you." It was a shock. His eyes darted to the door, like he expected someone to burst in. Miss Marple nodded, her needles steady. "Poison's a nasty thing. You're a doctor, any? Guess what it was?" Her question was soft, but her eyes were sharp, watching his face. He hesitated, then spoke low. "Likely. A plant toxin, maybe belladonna. Fast-acting, but I'm no expert on poisons." His voice wavered, and Miss Marple caught a lie in his tone. Doctors knew more than they let on, especially quiet ones like Poole. She pressed gently. "Odd, targeting you. Seen anything strange about the land deal? You were asking questions?" At dinner the first night, Dr. Poole's face paled. "I don't know much, just rumors. Sir Reginald's business isn't my concern." He paused, then leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "But I got a note a week ago. Anonymous. Said to watch my back if I poked around. I thought it was a prank, but after the tea, he trailed off, his hands shaking." Miss Marple's needles paused. Another note. This was new, and it tied Dr. Poole to the web. "Did you keep it?" she asked. He shook his head. "Burned it. I was scared." She nodded, her mind filing it away. Dr. Poole was a loose thread someone feared what he knew. Was it about the ledger's payments or something? Deeper. In St. Mary Mead, a threatening letter once exposed a blackmailer. This felt bigger, with higher stakes. She thanked him and left. Her thoughts churning. Dr. Poole was honest but holding back, scared into silence. She needed another angle. Victor Crane was next, his midnight raid still fresh in her mind. She found him in the parlor polishing his shoes, his cufflinks glinting, the same ones from the study. "Good morning, Mr. Crane," she said, settling into a chair, her knitting out. "Fine day for a chat." Victor flashed his charming smile. But it didn't reach his eyes. "Always a pleasure, Miss Marple. What's on your mind?" His tone was smooth, but she saw his fingers tighten on the cloth. She knitted, her voice mild. "Trouble seems to follow this house. Notes, poison, theft. You were in the study last night, weren't you? Looking for something?" Victor's smile froze, his eyes narrowing for a split second before he laughed. "Yes, I was there. Looking for papers on the land deal. Sir Reginald's up to his neck in fraught, and I wanted proof." He leaned back, his charm back in place. "I'm a businessman. Information's gold. Proof to expose him, or to use for yourself." Her question was soft, but it hit like a dart. Victor's laugh was too quick. "Expose, of course. I'm no saint, but I don't like cheats." His eyes flicked. To her knitting, then away. She didn't believe him. Victor was a fox, sniffing for profit, not justice. The ledger's initials some matched officials, but could one be his? She let it drop, her smile polite. "Be careful, Mr. Crane. Poking in desks can stir trouble." He nodded, his grin tight, and she left, her mind buzzing. Victor admitted to the raid but spun it as heroism. He was either a rival to Sir Reginald or a partner gone rogue. The ledger was key, and she'd guard it close. Clara was her next stop, the journalist's bold heart a match for her own. She found Clara in the garden, pacing by the roses, her notebook stuffed with papers. "Miss Marple," Clara said, waving her over. "Got a tip this morning." "A farmer. Mr. Tate swears his signature was forged on a land sale. Says he never agreed to sell." Her eyes sparkled like she'd struck gold. Miss Marple nodded, settling on a bench, her knitting out. "That fits what I've heard. Forged papers, bribes. I found a ledger payments, 2 initials, likely officials. Victor's involved, but how?" Clara's pencil flew. "Victor? That snake. My contact tied him to a shell company in the deal. It's either Sir Reginald's man or double-crossing him. She paused, then handed Miss Marple a paper. Look at this. A list of councilmen paid off, matching your initials. JB is John Barlow. TR is Thomas Reed. CW could be someone else, but it's damning. Miss Marple scanned the list, her mind clicking. The ledger's numbers lined up hundreds, thousands, all to silence voices. Sir Reginald's empire was built on this, and Victor was neck-deep, whether as ally or thief. She shared Dr. Poole's story, the anonymous note, his fear. Clara whistled. Another note. This is a nest of vipers. Someone's orchestrating chaos, maybe to topple Sir Reginald. Miss Marple nodded, her needles steady, or to hide their own tracks. The poison, the brochets, all connected. But who's pulling the strings? She thought of Lady Beatrice, her trembling hands, her silence. Was she a victim, or playing a deeper game? In St. Mary Mead, a quiet wife once hid her husband's crimes. Could Beatrice be the same? They parted, agreeing to share more clues. Miss Marple spent the afternoon chatting with maids, her questions gentle. No one saw the brooch, but a stable boy mentioned Victor wandering late near the study's window. It confirmed her suspicions. He was no hero, but a schemer with sticky fingers. The poison, she guessed, was his too, aimed at Dr. Poole to keep him quiet. The brooch theft felt like a trick, maybe to shift blame or fund his plans. Dinner was a storm waiting to break. Sir Reginald announced he'd push the land deal faster, despite the threats. No one scares me, he growled, his glass raised. Clara's pencil scratched under the table. Victor smirked, and Dr. Poole stared at his plate. The air crackled, like before. A lightning strike. Miss Marple ate quietly, her mind sorting threads. The ledger proved Sir Reginald's bribes. Victor's rage showed his greed. Dr. Poole's note hinted at a watcher, and Clara's evidence tied it to forged sales. The threatening note, she now suspected, came from inside the manor. Someone close, maybe Lady Beatrice herself, desperate to stop the deal. In St. Mary Mead, a forged check once unraveled a family feud. This was bigger, but the pattern was the same: greed, lies, and a spark to set it ablaze. After dinner, Miss Marple retired early, locking her door. The ledger stayed hidden, its secrets heavy. She knitted by the lamp, her needles a steady pulse. Victor was a danger, his motives murky. Dr. Poole was a target, his knowledge a threat. Clara was an ally, but her boldness could draw fire. Lady Beatrice was the wild card, her fear masking truth or guilt. The manor shadows seemed to whisper, but Miss Marple's heart was firm. The truth was near, and she'd pull it free, stitch by careful stitch. Chapter 6. The trap is set. The fourth day at Blackthornne Manor dawned with a crisp breeze, the sky clear after days of rain. Miss Jane Marple stood at her window, her knitting needles quiet as she watched the estate's fields glow under the morning sun. The ledger under her mattress burned in her thoughts. Its payments to initials proved Sir Reginald's bribes, tying him to forged land deals. Victor Crane's midnight raid, Dr. Poole's poisoning, the threatening note, and the stolen brooch were threads in a tangled web. Miss Marple's village instincts hummed. The culprit was close, hiding among the guests, and she needed to flush them out. She dressed in a neat gray frock, pinned her hat, and tucked her knitting bag under her arm. Her mind sharp as a needle. Breakfast was a strained affair, the dining room silver and crystal gleaming, but the mood sour. Sir Reginald sat at the head, his face like a thundercloud, barking at a maid about lukewarm coffee. Lady Beatrice poured tea, her hand steady, but her eyes darting, as if expecting a blow. Clara Wentworth, the journalist, nibbled toast, her notebook hidden, but her gaze piercing. Victor Crane leaned back, his smile tight, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm. Dr. Ernest Poole, still pale from the poison, ate slowly, his glasses slipping. Miss Marple took a seat near Clara, her tea untouched as she listened to the rooms. Silent screams. The talk was Thing Garden roses, a new road in town, but tension coiled like a spring. Clara mentioned the brooch theft, her voice light but pointed. "Any news, Lady Beatrice? Seems the thief's bold, striking under our noses." Lady Beatrice's cup rattled. "The police are searching," she said softly, glancing at Sir Reginald, who grunted. "Waste of time. It's long gone." His tone was gruff, but Miss Marple saw his jaw tighten. He was rattled, and not just about a jewel. Victor chuckled, swirling his juice. "Bold's the word." Notes. Poison. Theft. This house is a stage for trouble. His eyes flicked to Dr. Poole, who coughed, his fork clattering. Miss Marple's needles clicked in her lap. Victor was stirring the pot again, testing hood flinch. Dr. Poole's fear was plain. And she recalled his whispered confession, a threatening note. Burned, but real. Someone wanted him silent, and she suspected Victor knew why. Miss Marple's mind churned. The ledger's initials, JBTRCW, matched Clara's list of bribed officials. Victor's rage showed he was after the same proof, either to expose Sir Reginald or to steal his profits. The poison was likely his doing, aimed at Dr. Poole for sniffing too close. The brooch theft felt like a distraction, maybe to shift blame, or fund Victor's schemes. It was time to act, to set a trap and see who tripped. She leaned toward Lady Beatrice, her voice gentle. "This trouble's weighing on you, dear. Why not gather everyone, guests, staff, even local farmers, to talk openly about the land deal? Clear the air." Her eyes were kind, but her plan was sharp. A public airing would rattle the culprit. Forcing a move, Lady Beatrice hesitated, her hands twisting. "I don't know. Reginald might not like it." Sir Reginald overheard, his eyes narrowing. "Talk with farmers. They'll whine and lie." His voice was hard, but Miss Marple saw a flicker of fear. Clara jumped in, her tone bold. "It's a good idea. Secrets breed trouble." Tear. The farmer's out. Her eyes gleamed, sensing a story. Victor raised an eyebrow, his smile sly. "Sounds lively. I'm in." Dr. Poole nodded faintly, his face pale. Miss Marple's needles clicked. The trap was baited now to spread the net wider. She pulled Clara aside after breakfast in the library's quiet glow. "We need a spark," Miss Marple said, her voice low. "Leak word of a new witness, someone with proof of the fraud. Don't say who, just enough to stir panic. I like it. I'll call my contact in town, drop a hint in the local paper. Whoever's guilty will squirm." Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking. A fake witness would push the culprit to act, revealing their hand. Clara left to make the call, and Miss Marple strolled the grounds, chatting with the gardener, Mr. Gibbs. He confirmed the farmer's anger, their meetings in secret barns. "They'd come if Lady Beatrice asked," he said, leaning on his rake. "They trust her, not him." Miss Marple smiled, her plan solidifying. Lady Beatrice was the key to drawing the farmers, and their voices would shake the manor's walls. By afternoon, Lady Beatrice agreed to the gathering, her voice shaky but firm. "Tomorrow evening, in the Great Hall," she announced, her eyes avoiding Sir Reginald's scowl. He grudged his approval, sensing a chance to control the narrative. "Fine," he snapped, "but no nonsense. I'll set them straight." Miss Marple watched his bluster, her needles steady. His confidence was cracking, and she'd widen the split. Clara returned, her face alight. "It's done. The paper's running a vague story, new evidence in Harrowland dispute. No names, but it's buzzing." Miss Marple nodded, her trap set. The guests were on edge, the farmers primed, and the fake witness a ghost to haunt the guilty. Now she'd watch and wait. The day passed in a hum of anticipation. Miss Marple spent it observing her village habits sharp. Victor was too quiet, his charm replaced by quick glances. Dr. Poole stayed in his room, claiming weakness, but she suspected fear. Lady Beatrice fussed over details for the gathering, her nerves fraying. Sir Reginald stormed about, shouting at staff, his temper a mask for dread. Clara scribbled notes, her eyes on everyone. The manor felt like a chessboard, and Miss Marple was moving her pieces. The gathering began at dusk, the great hall packed with chairs and lit by chandeliers. Farmers filled the room, their weathered faces grim, their boots scuffing the polished floor. Guests and staff lined the walls, the air thick with whispers. Lady Beatrice stood at the front, her silk dress trembling as she welcomed everyone. "We want to hear you," she said, her voice small but clear. "No secrets." Sir Reginald loomed beside her, his arms crossed, his eyes daring anyone to speak. A farmer, Mr. Tate, stood first, his voice rough. "My land was stolen, never signed no paper, but my name's on it. Harrow's men threatened me, said I'd lose everything if I fought." Murmurs rose, other farmers nodding. A woman, Mrs. Cole, added, "They offered pennies for our fields." Then forged the rest. "We've got families to feed." The room buzzed, anger sparking like flint. Sir Reginald stepped forward, his voice booming. "Lies. You signed fair deals. Progress needs sacrifice." His face was red, but Miss Marple saw his hands clench. The farmers shouted back, their voices a tide. Clara scribbled furiously, her eyes alight. Victor watched from a corner, his face unreadable. Dr. Poole shrank in his chair, his glasses fogged. Lady Beatrice wrung her hands, her eyes wet. Miss Marple stood near the back, her knitting in her bag, her eyes scanning. But the real test was coming. Clara's leaked story about a witness hung like smoke, and she waited for a reaction. Victor shifted, his foot tapping. Dr. Poole glanced at the door as if ready to bolt. Lady Beatrice bit her lip, her face pale. Then a shout from outside broke the chaos. "Fire!" a maid screamed, pointing to the stables. Flames licked the wooden walls, smoke curling into the sky. The room erupted, guests and farmers rushing out. Sir Reginald cursed, barking orders. Lady Beatrice froze, her hands to her mouth. Fires weren't accidents, not now. She reached the stables, the heat stinging her face. Stable boys tossed buckets of water, but the blaze roared. Miss Marple sniffed the air, kerosene, sharp and unmistakable. Arson, not a stray spark. She scanned. The crowd? Sir Reginald shouted at the staff, his face a mask of rage. Lady Beatrice clung to a maid, sobbing. Clara snapped photos, her journalist's instinct sharp. Dr. Poole hovered at the edge, his eyes wide. Victor was missing. Miss Marple slipped behind the stables, her eyes sharp. A can of kerosene lay tipped in the grass, its cap loose. Footprints led to the manor's side door fresh, with mud from the damp ground. She followed them, her heart steady. The prince stopped at the door and she spotted a smudge of soot on the handle. Someone had set the fire and slipped back inside. The fire was out thanks to the farmer's quick work, but the stables were half gone. Sir Reginald raged, blaming vandals. This is war. He roared, his fists clenched. Lady Beatrice trembled, her voice lost. Clara whispered to Miss Marple, this was no accident. Someone wanted to stop the meeting. Miss Marple nodded, her mind clicking. The fire was a desperate move, meant to silence the farmers and bury the witness rumor. She caught Victor slipping in, his cuffs smudged with soot, his face flushed. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice mild but her eyes hard. He shrugged, his smile forced. "Helping with the buckets. Got messy." His lie was thin, and Miss Marple marked it. The kerosene, the footprints, the soot. Victor was the arsonist, she was sure. Striking to kill the farmer's protest and protect his stake in the fraud, the gathering fizzled. The farmers leaving with promises to fight. Sir Reginald stormed to his study, Lady Beatrice trailing. Clara and Dr. Poole retreated, their faces grim. Victor lingered, his eyes on Miss Marple, as if gauging her. She smiled, her needles clicking, but her mind was a steel trap. The fire. Was Victor's panic proof he was deeper in the web than she'd thought? The ledger, the poison, the brooch. The note Tall pointed to him. But she needed hard evidence. Miss Marple returned to her room, locking the door. The ledger stayed hidden, its secrets heavy. She knitted by the lamp, her thoughts weaving. Victor? Was a fox, cunning but cornered? The fire failed, and the farmers' voices were louder now. Clara's witness rumor had worked, pushing him to act. Lady Beatrice's fear, Dr. Poole's silence, Sir Reginald's rage, they were all pieces, and Victor was the knot tying them. In St. Mary Mead, a barn fire once hid a theft. This was bigger, but the pattern held chaos to cover guilt. The Manor's shadows seemed to watch, but Miss Marple's heart was steady. The trap was sprung, and Victor had tripped. One more push, and the truth would unravel, stitch by careful stitch. Chapter 7. The final revelation. The fifth morning at Blackthornne Manor broke with a golden sun, its rays slicing through the mist that clung to the estate's fields. Miss Jane Marple sat in her room, her knitting needles quiet as she stared at the ledger hidden under her mattress, its pages of payments to initials JBTR. CW were the key to Sir Reginald Harrow's crooked land deal, a web of bribes and forged papers. The threatening note, Dr. Poole's poisoning, Victor Crane's midnight raid, the stolen brooch, and last night's stable fire were all threads tied to that ledger. Miss Marple's village instincts buzzed like a beehive. The truth was close, and today she'd unravel it, quiet as a whisper but sharp as a blade. She dressed in a simple blue frock, pinned her hat, and slipped her knitting bag over her arm, ready to end the game. The dining room was a storm of silence at breakfast, the silver trays of eggs and toast ignored. Sir Reginald sat at the head, his face red, his hands clenched as he glared at the guests. Lady Beatrice poured tea, her eyes hollow, her smile gone. Clara Wentworth, the journalist, scribbled in her notebook, her sharp gaze flicking between faces. Victor Crane leaned back, his charm a thin mask, his fingers tapping nervously. Dr. Ernest Poole, still weak from the poison, stared at his plate, his glasses fogged. Miss Marple took a seat near Lady Beatrice, her tea cooling as she felt the room's tension coil like a snake. Talk with scarce mutterings about the fire. The farmer's anger, but every word carried weight. Clara broke the quiet, her voice crisp. The paper's buzzing about that witness. Says they've got proof of fraud. Any guesses, Sir Reginald? Her eyes locked on him, daring a response. He slammed his cup down, tea splashing. Lies. I'll sue anyone who slanders me. His voice boomed, but Miss Marple saw his hands shake. He was cornered, and he knew it. Victor chuckled, his tone forced. Sounds like someone's scared. Truth's a nasty thing, isn't it? His eyes darted to Dr. Poole, who flinched, his fork clattering. Lady Beatrice gasped softly, her napkin twisting. Miss Marple's needles clicked in her lap. Victor was fanning the flames, but his own guilt was plain the soot on his cuffs last night. The kerosene's sharp whiff. The fire was his, meant to silence the farmers and kill Clara's witness rumor. She was ready to spring her trap. After breakfast, Miss Marple gathered the guests in the drawing room, its velvet chairs and glowing fire a stark contrast to the cold fear in their eyes. She stood by the hearth, her knitting bag at her feet, her voice calm but firm. It's time to clear the air, she said, her eyes sweeping the room. This house is full of secrets, and they've led to poison, theft, and fire. I've seen enough to know the truth, and I'll share it now. The guests froze, their faces a mix of dread and curiosity. Sir Reginald scoffed, but his bluster was thin. Lady Beatrice clutched her shawl, her lips trembling. Clara's pencil poised, Victor's smile faded. And Dr. Poole shrank in his chair. Miss Marple began, her tone steady, like telling a story. In St. Mary Mead, it started with a note, threatening the Harrows to stop the land deal. Its words were rough, misspelled on purpose, written on cheap paper. Not a farmer's work, but someone close inside this house. She paused, her eyes on Lady Beatrice, who gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Lady Beatrice, you wrote it, didn't you? To scare your husband into stopping his plans. Lady Beatrice sobbed, her voice breaking. Yes, I did it. I couldn't stand what he was doing, stealing land, hurting people. I thought if he was afraid, he'd stop. She crumpled into her chair, tears streaming. Sir Reginald roared, Beatrice, you fool! But Miss Marple raised a hand, silencing him. She meant no harm, she said, just to save the farmers. But her note sparked more than she planned. She turned to the poison, her voice sharp. Dr. Poole's tea was laced with belladonna, a rare toxin meant to kill or warn. Dr. Poole, he'd been asking questions, digging into the land deal. Q got a note too, telling you to back off. Someone feared what you knew. Dr. Poole nodded, his voice a whisper. I found papers. Payments, I didn't know who to trust. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Victor. The poison was no accident. It came from someone with access and knowledge. She pulled the ledger from her bag, its leather cover worn. I found this in Sir Reginald's study, thanks to Mr. Crane's late-night visit. Victor's face tightened, but she pressed on. It lists payments to initials John Barlow, Thomas Reed, others bribed to push the land deal through. Forged contracts, threats, all to steal farmers' land. Sir Reginald, this is your work, isn't it? She held up the ledger, her eyes locked on him. Sir Reginald stood, his face purple. You've no proof. That's mine, stolen. But his voice cracked, and Miss Marple saw the room shift. Clara's nod, Lady Beatrice's tears, Dr. Poole's relief. She turned to Victor, her voice like a blade. Mr. Crane, you're no bystander. You poisoned Dr. Poole to keep him quiet. You stole the brooch to stir chaos, maybe to sell it. And the fire last night carouse scene, your footprints soot, on your cuffs. You set it to stop the farmers, to protect your share in the fraud. Victor laughed, but it was hollow. You're mad, old lady? No evidence. Miss Marple stepped closer, her eyes steel. The police have the teacup, the kerosene can. Your Prince and Clara's records tie you to a shell company in the deal. You're Sir Reginald's partner. But you turned greedy, didn't you? Wanted it all. Clara stood, her voice fierce. She's right. I've got names, dates, bank transfers. You're done, Crane. Victor's smile vanished, his hands clenching. He lunged for the door, but Inspector Reed, summoned by Clara earlier, stepped in with 2 constables. Going somewhere? Reed asked, his mustache twitching. Victor froze, his shoulders slumping. Miss Marple continued, her voice calm. Sir Reginald built this scheme, bribes, forgeries, threats. Victor joined for profit, but when Dr. Poole and Clara got close, he panicked. The note was Lady Beatrice's cry for help. The poison was Victor's warning. The brooch his distraction, the fire his last gamble. But truth catches up, like it always does in my village. Sir Reginald roared, lunging at Victor. You traitor! The constables grabbed him, cuffs clicking. Victor snarled. He's the mastermind. I just followed. But Reed shook his head. You're both coming in. Fraud, attempted murder, arson, plenty to sort out. Lady Beatrice sobbed, her face buried in her hands. But Miss Marple saw relief in her eyes. The truth was out, her burden lifted. Clara approached Miss Marple, her grin wide. You're a marvel. I'd have missed half of this. Miss Marple smiled, her needles clicking again. It's just an old lady who listens, dear. Dr. Poole stood, his voice soft. Thank you. I was scared, but you saved me. Miss Marple patted his arm. Fear makes us quiet, but truth sets us free. The police led Sir Reginald and Victor away, their shouts echoing down the hall. Lady Beatrice rose, her voice shaky but firm. "I'll make this right. The farmers will get their land back." Her eyes met Miss Marple's, grateful. The room emptied, the guests dispersing, the Manor's shadows lighter now. Miss Marple gathered her knitting, her heart steady. The battle was won, not with noise, but with the quiet clarity of a village spinster. She returned to her room, packing her things. The ledger went to Inspector Reed, its secrets no longer hers to hold. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a stolen cow once unraveled a feud. Blackthornne Manor was grander, but the heart was the same. Greed lies, and the spark of truth to burn them away. As she folded her dresses, Miss Marple smiled. The puzzle was solved, the web untangled, stitch by careful stitch. Epilogue. Back in St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple sipped tea, reflecting on Blackthornne Manor. The case had reminded her of a village scandal years ago, a reminder that greed and deceit thrived in any setting. Clara's article on the Harrow scandal made headlines, and Lady Beatrice wrote to thank Miss Marple, enclosing a new knitting pattern. As she cast on a new scarf, Miss Marple wondered what mystery might next cross her path.